everyone. So in the previous video, we looked at the proportion of alcohol eliminated. And in this new video, we're going to actually look at the amount of alcohol eliminated. So when we are thinking about the amount of alcohol eliminated, we're actually taking the proportion, so that's what this P stands for, the proportion of alcohol multiplied by the amount of alcohol we have in the system. This formula right here should look very familiar. It was the proportion formula we used in the previous video. And then we're going to take that formula, multiply it by A, which gives us this new formula. So this new formula gives us the amount of alcohol eliminated. Okay, so we're going to start off our first example with assuming someone has 50 grams of alcohol in their system. So if you want to think about how much alcohol that is, one drink or one shot was 14 grams, 2 drinks was 28 grams, 3 was 42, and 4 drinks or 4 shots would be 56 grams. So that means that it is somewhere between 3 and 4, so about 3.5 drinks would give someone 50 grams of alcohol. Okay, so we're going to use our function to determine the amount of grams of alcohol their system or body will metabolize after a few different hours. Okay, so at hour 0, we have our 50 grams of alcohol in our system. None of that has been eliminated yet because we're going to assume that the person consumed all 3.5 of those shots in a pretty quick succession to bring them to the 50 grams. So after 1 hour of consumption, we're going to use that formula that I just showed on the previous page. So y equals 10A divided by 4.2 plus A. So that gives us 10 times 50 divided by 4.2 plus 50. Okay, and when you plug that into your calculators, you should get 9.2 grams. So that tells us that this is the amount of alcohol that is going to be eliminated from your system. So at the end of hour 1, we're going to take the 50 grams that originally was in your system and minus the 9.2 that your body eliminated, leaving us with 40.8 grams. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and move on to the second hour. So we're still going to use that same formula, but now instead of 50 for A, we're going to use the 40.8 because that is how much is currently in your system at hour 2. So that gives us 10 times 40.8 divided by 4.2 plus 40.8. Okay, so go ahead and plug that into your calculators. If you need to, there's one of two things to do when you plug into your calculator. One is to put parentheses around that denominator, or you can simplify both the numerator and the denominator. So this numerator, 10 times 40.8 is 408, divided by, and then adding those two together, we get 45. Okay, so alternatively, you can divide 408 by 45, and that gives us 9.06. So again, this tells us how many grams of alcohol have been eliminated from your system. Currently, at the start of that hour, we had 40.8 grams. Over the hour, our body metabolized 9.06, leaving us with 31.74 grams after 2 hours. All right, so we've been talking about 2 different types of formulas, and I wanted to put them on the same screen here so you can see the difference. So the first formula has been referring to the proportion of alcohol eliminated. And then the second formula is the amount of alcohol that is eliminated. So what we're going to do now is look at a table of a couple hours where the person has only consumed 1 drink. We'll repeat that with 2 drinks and then with 3 drinks. So on this first table here, you can see that now we have different columns. The first one is for the proportion. The second one is for the amount eliminated, right? So now we're using both of the formulas in the same table. Okay, and as I stated, we're going to start with 1 drink, which is 14 grams of alcohol. So after 1 hour in the system, we're going to think about the proportion, which is that first formula. So 10 divided by 4.2 plus 14. That gives us 10 divided by 18.2, which is 0.549. Or we can write that as a percent of 54.9% of alcohol is eliminated from your system. Okay, the next column, we're going to think about the amount of alcohol. So that's using the formula 10 times A, so 10 times 14 grams of alcohol, divided by 4.2 plus 14. Again, you can plug that into your calculator, but if you want to simplify both the top and the bottom, you can do that. This gives us 140 divided by 16.2. When we divide those two numbers out, we get 7.7 grams. Okay, so let's talk about what those two numbers mean. So if you are consuming one drink that's 14 grams of alcohol, your body's going to metabolize almost 55% of that alcohol, which is equivalent to 7.7 grams of alcohol. Okay, and then the last column is the amount of alcohol remaining. So we're going to do 14 minus the amount that was metabolized. So 14 grams is what we started with. Body metabolized 7.7 grams, leaving us with 6.3 grams of alcohol in our system. So this is what is happening after 1 hour. Okay, we're going to continue that process and then look at what happens after hour 2. So we get 10 divided by 4.2 plus the A here is always going to refer to the amount of alcohol that is in the system. So right now we have this particular example has 6.3 grams of alcohol. So that is now going to be our new A value. Okay, when you divide that out, we get 0.95 or 95%. Okay, and the reason why it ended up being a higher proportion is because there's less alcohol in the system. So your body does a better job of metabolizing that alcohol. Next column, we have the amount of alcohol eliminated. So that's going to be 10 times 6.3 divided by 4.2 plus 6.3 equals 6 grams. Okay, and again, I just quickly want to talk about what those two numbers represent. So after 1 hour, you only have 6.3 grams of alcohol in your system. Your body can now metabolize 95% of that alcohol, and that is equivalent to 6 grams of alcohol. Okay, and so then we take, to find the amount of alcohol remaining, we take the 6.3 grams minus the 6 that was eliminated, and we are left with 0.03 grams. So what this portrays is that if you have one drink, it takes roughly 2 hours to almost completely metabolize the alcohol in your system. Okay, so what I would like for you to do now is pause the video and complete the next 2 tables. So what do those tables look like when you have 2 drinks as well as 3 drinks? So go ahead and pause the video. All right, on the screen you can see the answer for when you have consumed 2 drinks of alcohol. You can see initially the first hour, the person can burn 31% of the alcohol, which is equivalent to 8.7 grams, leaving 19.3 grams in the system. The following hour, because there is less alcohol in your system, more of it can be metabolized, so a higher proportion, and that is equivalent to 8.2 grams, and then leaving 11.1 gram in your system. So one of the things that I have had students question is, why is this number getting larger, but this number getting smaller? Right, so you can see this number went from 31% to 42.6%. That gets higher because there's less alcohol in your system, which makes your body more efficient at metabolizing it. So it's a higher proportion. So the reason that this number goes down from 8.7 to 8.2 is because even though it's a higher percentage, you still have more alcohol in your system. All right, and here you can see the solutions for the third table where we are consuming 3 drinks. So again, we've got the first column is the proportion of alcohol eliminated, the second column, the amount eliminated, and then the remaining amount after each hour. Okay, so next what I want you to do is think about what do you notice about the first hour of each of those scenarios. So what I'm going to do is create a new table with just the first hour data to help you focus on just what's happening in the first hour. So this table represents the first hour for each of those quantity of drinks. So here's 1 drink, second row is 2 drinks, and then the last row is the 3 drinks. So in just a second, I want you to pause the video and compare what is happening with each of those columns. Okay, so the thing that I absolutely want you to understand that as the amount of alcohol increases, so that's this very first column, amount of alcohol increases, the proportion decreases, right? And that's because your body becomes less efficient at burning or metabolizing that alcohol. So that's why it decreases when the quantity of alcohol in your system increases. And then for the amount of alcohol, notice here that the actual amount of alcohol eliminated increases. Okay, so again, the proportion is decreasing, but because there's so much alcohol in your system, that actually equates to just a little bit more alcohol actually being eliminated from your system. The other thing I want to point out is that when we look at the amount of alcohol eliminated, there's really a limit to how much can actually be metabolized by your body. So what we're going to do is we're going to explore these numbers a little bit more. All right, I want you to go ahead and pause the video and read through this next problem. All right, so there's actually a lot to unpack in this problem, so we're actually going to do 2 separate things as we try to answer this question. So the first thing we're going to do is go to an Excel sheet and play around with the formula. And then I'm also going to show you what happens with our graph and looking at the asymptote that shows up. So we'll unpack this first with the Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so what we're going to do is create an Excel spreadsheet that really helps us understand how we're going to break down that 160 grams of alcohol in his system. So we're going to start with we're just going to start with hours as our column. We're going to do 0 equals previous cell plus 1. Right, because that's really our question is how long does it take to metabolize the 160 grams. So the second column is going to be the amount of alcohol eliminated. And the third column is going to be the amount of alcohol remaining, just like we did on our previous problem. Okay, I'm going to format a little bit here. Okay, so at hour 0, we haven't eliminated any alcohol, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that spot blank. And then the amount of alcohol remaining, we are starting with 160 grams. Okay, so the tables that we just completed, we're going to now create that in an Excel spreadsheet where we're always using previous answers, and this is what it's going to look like. So to figure out the amount of alcohol that is eliminated, that's that formula that we've seen before. So equals 10 times the amount of alcohol in the system. So we're going to come up here and click the 160. We're going to divide, open parenthesis, 4.2 plus, again, now we want the 160 grams. Okay, because that is filling in both of those A positions with the 160 grams. And then when we hit enter, it's telling us that they've metabolized 9.7 grams of alcohol. All right, and then for this cell, for the amount of alcohol remaining, we're going to do just like we did in our tables, where we're going to take the amount and subtract the amount that was eliminated. So it's going to look like this, equals, and typically we would have done 160 minus the amount of alcohol eliminated, but we want to take the previous amount. So we're going to click on the cell that represents 160 minus the amount of alcohol eliminated. So this is what your formula should look like, equals C2 minus B3. And then hit enter. And so then the process is that we had 160, we minus 9.7, giving us the 150. Okay, we're going to scroll each of those formulas down. I am going to reduce that to just 1 decimal to make it a little bit easier to read. So go up to the number formatting. We're going to click number. And it automatically does 2 decimals, which is fine, but if you wanted to reduce it down to 1 decimal, you can click these buttons here that increase the accuracy or the precision, and then you can decrease. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to 1 decimal for each of those. Okay, now what we're going to do is scroll down each of these formulas. So go here. It's okay that these are zeros because they're using cells that don't have numbers in them yet, but watch when we scroll down this formula. Everything will auto adjust. Okay, so we are right here. Okay, and notice that we're not quite down to 0 yet, so if you wanted to scroll each of those formulas down, you can. So we can do them each individually, or there's this nice little shortcut. I can highlight all 3 of the rows and scroll down all 3 formulas separately. Okay, what this means when we see a negative number, it just means that you're burning more than exists in the system. So this cell right here tells me that I have 3.1 grams of alcohol in the system. The next hour you burned technically 4.2 according to the formula, but there wasn't enough to burn. So that means we have now burned off all the alcohol. Okay, so our original question was, suppose that a person drank 160 grams of alcohol, and that's how much is currently in their system. The big question is, how long must they wait before driving? And so remember, our threshold for a BAC of 0.08 is about 34 grams. So this right here tells us if they wait 13 hours, they will still have 35.9 grams of alcohol in their system. So they have to wait till the next hour before they are below that threshold of 0.08. Okay, so if you look at this, it means that a person who consumed 160 grams, which is about 11 drinks or 11 shots, it will take them 14 hours before they are legally able to drive. And it would take a full 18 hours before that alcohol is completely eliminated from their system. So again, time is the only thing that helps us eliminate the alcohol. So here in this column, you can see that in those first 14 hours, they were only able to burn between 9 and 9.7 grams of alcohol. So there is a limit to how much a person can eliminate in their system. So what we're going to do next is explore this idea of how much or what is the max a body can metabolize, and look at the asymptote that shows up with this formula. All right, we're going to go ahead and create another spreadsheet using some of the information that we've already discovered from the previous tables that we filled out. So we're going to start by entering the number of drinks. We're going to click 0, equals, and then we want to increase by 1 every time. So equals, previous cell, plus 1, enter, and we're going to scroll that formula down. This column, same thing as we've seen before. We're going to enter the number of grams of drinks, which is equal to the number of drinks times 14. Scroll that formula down. Okay, and those numbers should look familiar, right? So 14 grams is 1 drink, 28 grams is 2 drinks, 42 grams is 3 drinks. Okay, and then let me label that column. And then the last column, we're going to do the amount of alcohol eliminated. So this is that formula that we've just been working on. Okay, so we're going to do equals 10 times the grams of alcohol. So I'm going to click on the cell that represents the grams. Oops, and I forgot, we should put a multiplication symbol here. So equals 10 multiplication symbol times our A value, which is the number of grams, divided by, open parenthesis, 4.2 plus, again, we're going to click on the number of grams because our denominator is 4.2 plus A. And then we're going to close off that parenthesis and then hit enter. And of course, that number should make sense because if you don't have any alcohol in your system, you should not have burned any alcohol. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and scroll this formula down. Okay, and right now we have a lot of decimals there. Let's go ahead and change this to number, and we can even go down to just 1 decimal. So to do that, I changed this to number and then moved 1 decimal smaller. Okay, and those numbers should look familiar. Those are the numbers we just found in our previous tables. So when we had 1 drink, the very first hour, your body eliminated 7.7 grams. If you look at the second table, when we had 2 drinks after 1 hour, we've eliminated 8.7 grams. And then that third table, after we had 3 drinks, the first hour, your body eliminated 9.1 grams. So this table right here is just increasing the number of drinks, and then it shows how much alcohol is eliminated. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and lengthen this cell and then wrap our text like we've done before. All right, so this very first column represents the number of drinks. And as I said earlier, most people will pass out long before they consume this much alcohol. And I want you to pay attention to the amount of alcohol eliminated. What I'm going to do is take all 3 of these formulas and scroll down. And I want you to really notice what happens with that third column. So initially, it starts to increase. We have 7.7 grams here, 8.7, 9.1. And then all of a sudden it kind of reaches this amount of 9.8, and then it gets to 9.9, and it stays at 9.9. So if we go to graph this, I'm going to go ahead and graph just the last 2 columns here. And it doesn't matter exactly where you stop. I stopped at about 34 drinks. I'm going to insert the graph. And what I really want you to notice on this graph is that it is increasing, but there's this limit. So this right here is what we call an asymptote. So our function has a limit. So our body has a limit of being able to eliminate 10 grams of alcohol in our system. So it can eliminate a lot in the beginning, but then your body can only do so much. So we end up with this limit of 10 grams of alcohol. And so that is one of the big takeaways I want you to get from this section, is that our body can't remove more than 10 grams of alcohol per hour from our system. Okay, so big takeaways that I want you to have from this unit is that the body cannot remove more than 10 grams of alcohol per hour from your system. And if a person drinks too much alcohol, only time can help. Right? So again, there's a max of how much can be eliminated, so time is the only thing that will eliminate the alcohol from your system. All right, that's the end of this video, and we'll see you in the next one.